It is written in Idaho's Constitution, Article 3, Section 16. Every act shall embrace but one subject and matters properly connected therewith. The single subject rule. And that has served as a guidepost for lawmakers at our state capital since. However, that's not the case in our nation's capital. You know, they don't call them omnibus bills for nothing. Hundreds of pages, dozens of topics, and claims of, we don't even know what's in this bill. For example, the reconciliation bill from earlier this summer. Big, but very confusing. Well, one Idaho congressman is hoping to change the way things have been done in D.C. for decades. Joe Paris spoke with Representative Russ Fulcher about his pitch.
Following Congress in D.C. can certainly be complicated. Just reading the bills they pass takes time, maybe lots of time. Yeah, you got to get through hundreds or thousands of pages. An Idaho congressman is working to change that process.
This has been a multiple-year effort for me. I started this in my very first year of Congress. The very first bill that I launched was a single-subject bill because I could see right away this is a problem.
A single-subject rule is something Congressman Russ Fulcher has operated with before.
This is an Idaho policy, and frankly, it's served the state very, very well. I experienced that, worked with it in leadership within the Idaho State Legislature.
It's actually in Idaho's Constitution, essentially saying that laws must stick to one main topic, which must be identified in the title of the bill. And if a law covers other topics not mentioned in that title, only those extra parts of the law, they actually become invalid if it passed. The main law would stay in effect.
Anybody who follows the Idaho legislature knows it's not perfect. I know. I was in it for 10 years, and there's problems and there's always debate. But compare and contrast that to what happens in Washington, D.C. I can't recall in my years in the state legislature in Idaho that we were processing bills that were thousands and thousands of pages long. There might have been some big bills, but they weren't these massive, massive omnibus things because we didn't throw everything into one piece of legislation. It's disingenuous to our constituents.
The current process in Congress, used by Republicans and Democrats, involves omnibus bills, massive packages with no common tie.
Multiple pieces of legislation on multiple topics, all thrown into one bill. And so every member of Congress has to weigh the good, the bad, because there's always something you like, there's always something you don't like. And it just is a bad way to create policy. And frankly, it's a good way to spend more money. And that's both problematic.
The big pitch to Congress, H.R. 4324.
The idea is to improve transparency, to make there fair debate on single topics and not just combine everything into one big bill.
The pitch relates to a major discussion in D.C. this year, spending practices.
If you look at our situation, we've got about a $37 trillion debt, and we have not, as a Congress, passed a budget through traditional means since 1997, 1998, that Congress. And so you have to think about how did all that come about? Well, part of the problem is what is called these omnibus bills.
But there are clearly members of Congress that prefer the system as is.
Where the pushback comes is from those who subscribe to the earmark policy. And earmarks are typically special things for special areas that may not get passed any other way. And frankly, it's a behind-the-scenes negotiation tool that is, in my opinion, just simply not healthy. And is that how things get done? Yeah, that happens from time to time. I just disagree with that method.
So Congressman Fulcher has been working on this effort in the United States House for a number of years, and there is partner legislation being brought right now in the United States Senate by Senator Rand Paul. And Brian, to be clear, and there's some confusion on this topic even when I research it at the congressional level, just because, if this were to pass, just because you can't have multiple topics in one bill doesn't mean that several topics on the same topic couldn't be put together. So some people say Congress would never get through thousands of pieces of legislation, and that is true. However, the pitch involves saying, okay, everything in education here, everything in tax policy here, instead of kind of combining it all.
And to tie this to the way Idaho does it, we talked about this earlier, like this was brought up a couple years ago, 2022 and I think in 2024 when House Bill 521, they had that big bill that was like income tax reduction, school facilities, sales tax tied to school facilities, and everybody went, wait a second, this is not how we're supposed to do this. But as the Lieutenant Governor Scott Bedke said at the time, you know what? If there's a golden thread and you have to sometimes squint your eyes and cock your head to see it, if that's there, then it's still a single subject.
Yeah, and that's also the thing, too, is whether it's Congress or the Idaho legislature, the lawmakers govern this and police it on their own. So there would always be exceptions made. However, we have, especially with the big, beautiful bill, and we've seen a lot of the feedback from congressional members, from the American public, a lot of confusion because of how big these packages are. And we even heard members of Congress say, well, I didn't necessarily know that was in there or that final legislation looked like that. So it's an effort from Congressman Fulcher. We'll see what type of traction it gets, but a lot of things to do in Congress. We have heard from some members that say, you know, you really have to get it done this way. Like, you have to combine these topics and be able to negotiate. And there is certainly a perspective of, okay, well, if nobody's happy, then I guess we can all support it.
The last Idaho congressman to go back to Washington to try to fundamentally change things was Raul Labrador, and that didn't work out so well.
He did change certain ways, though, that the policies are reflected with his group in the House.
In Congress?
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
But the fundamental changes, which is what this would be.
Right.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Joe.